Welcome to another episode of Influence and Growth Mastery. We have a special guest today, and given our unique backgrounds and missions of both of our journeys, we're going to talk about a topic that weaves our expertise, values, and journeys. I've given it a topic of healing journeys from bedside to business, transforming compassion into entrepreneurial success. And this topic, it really encapsulates the transition from healthcare to entrepreneurship, highlighting the role of compassion, critical thinking, holistic approaches in driving personal growth and professional achievement. That's a whole lot to say, but I just want to tell you, it's going to be so good today. I have Georgette with me this morning. Georgette, welcome. It's so good to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Tonya. I'm very excited to be here and have this conversation with you today.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here. I often tell people, this is another guest that I've met on Alignable, but for you, I met you at the Leadership John Maxwell show that we had, or the conference that we had just several weeks ago. And number one, it was such an inspiring opportunity, but to meet you was just so phenomenal and hear a little bit about your story. And we had a little bit of conversation about that. And I was like, we've got to bring you onto the show. So I'm so glad you're here for us to talk about that journey today. So can you share with us a little bit about what initially drew you into nursing and how you've seen the advocacy play a pivotal role in your career?
Oh, that's a lovely story I like to tell. And so I've been a nurse now since 2007. I've stopped counting how many years it has been, but I know it's more than a decade, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done. But before I got there, as a child, I was very sick all the time. And my dad had friends who were doctors in the neighborhood. So I rarely ever went to the hospital or to the clinic unless those friends ordered it. Whenever I was sick, I would get my IVs at home. My mom started nursing school training way before I was born, but did not complete it. So she was able to start my IVs, stop my IVs, control them and everything. So I was fascinated by medicine. I was fascinated by the fact that an injection or an IV or a medication could make me feel better within hours. So I was naturally drawn to that. I was the little girl who could play with dolls, as well as I always asked for a doctor set as a child. It was my favorite thing to do. And so the family kind of noticed that and said, oh, she's going to be the doctor of the family. So fast forward to my teenage years, by the time I got to high school, I was so bored with school. I didn't want to do med school. So it was one of those uncles who you saw once in a while, and you really didn't know what they were about. And he had told my dad, when she finishes school, I will take care of med school, because he was a doctor somewhere in France, and I will take care of med school. She'll be under my tutelage. This is going to work out. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm about to be in school for another 7 years. I don't want to do this. I can't remember what uncle it was. And so when I got admission to Henderson State University in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, I jumped on it, and it was nursing school. I remember the first 2 years of nursing school, my dad wasn't so pleased, but by my junior and senior year, he was so proud that I chose nursing. And I fell in love with it so hard by the time I finished my bachelor's degree, because I realized I also wanted to be a mom, and I didn't want to be the stereotypical doctor mom who is not always there for her children. So that's what actually drew me into that. And talking about advocacy, that's something that we learn as we go as nurses. And you get to a certain point in your nursing practice, because I started at the bedside, you get to a certain point in your practice where everything starts to make sense, where your confidence skyrockets. It's that one incident or a combination of events surrounding something that makes you go, oh, I am a nurse now. I know what advocacy looks like. I know what it sounds like. And I know what it feels like, regardless of the challenges surrounding that. So, yeah, that's how I got into nursing. And understanding advocacy for me was being able to speak up for my patients when they just could not express themselves properly or explain what was going on with them.
Mm-hmm. As you began to tell your story and you mentioned your mom not finishing school, but her compassion, for you, for that role. And just because she didn't finish, that really doesn't mean that she didn't know her skill set, didn't know the role. She still knew how to take care of you, even back then, because I think about the things that many people do today without that college degree. There's so many people, there's some roles that you can't do without the license or without the certificate or without the degree, but it doesn't diminish what they know. And so she knew how to take care of you because she had some of that knowledge. That's so awesome. Well, let's talk about, so continuing with the essence of compassion, you mentioned compassion. I just mentioned compassion. And sometimes that can be a daily challenge in nursing. Can you share a time where your compassion was tested and maybe how you even navigated through that situation?
Yes. Oh my gosh. First of all, the word compassion is thrown around so much within the healthcare industry. And intellectually, we understand it. But emotionally and in practice, it takes a while for you to understand what compassion truly is. So I like to find the root words of things, especially these words, these big words that tend to encompass our human condition. And compassion is from Latin and Greek, which means to suffer with.
Uh-uh.
When I started out as a nurse, it was easy for me to go, I am compassionate, I am kind, I am smart, all the great affirmations of being a nurse. And then you practice compassion. You practice when you go to the bedside and talk to somebody and listen to them. This is what nurses are skilled at. We're great at listening to what is not said. And we take that information and include it in whatever physical skill that we're applying to be able to care for you. And so throughout my nursing practice up till today, where I'm not at the bedside anymore, I get to actually feel compassion way more because I am not bogged down by 6 to 10 patients. I'm probably dealing with one person at a time.
Mm.
And compassion is one of those things where even when people talk about self-love and self-compassion, it's quite self-centered, whereas compassion is not. Compassion is being able to be present with someone within whatever it is that they're going through, whatever it is that they're dealing with, and be able to hold your own while providing support for them. That's what compassion is. And it is draining. It is draining. And bedside or not, if there's any nurses listening, I'm sure there's at least one person who can relate to this. There are some people who, while at the bedside, can treat you so badly that you almost get jaded when you go to take care of them and go, I don't even, I'm here because I'm a nurse. It's so ingrained in me. It's second nature for me to care for you. But it takes a different kind of nurse to tap back into compassion and realize that regardless of how this person is behaving, if you're not in danger, the person is not in danger, you can still do your job. That is a very common issue with compassion and nurses. And this is where people go, tend to say, oh, the nurse didn't care about me and this, that, and the other. Not to say that there are not bad nurses out there, but I'm saying the general sentiment is we have to stop and tap into that and go, this person's being difficult, but I'm going to still do my job the best way that I know how. So yeah, compassion is one of those things where when people say, oh, I'm very compassionate, I almost say, how do you know? Because it takes a different kind of awareness to be able to be compassionate. When it's away from the bedside, it's usually people questioning your authority, questioning your expertise, questioning your intelligence, and yet you have to deal with these people. So the most recent one that happened was a couple of months ago when I was talking to a gentleman who had multiple injuries and just would not take responsibility for his own self. And he was trying to put all the care and, recovery on the healthcare team, on the medical team. And I was teaching him because I was trying to be compassionate and teaching him how to care for himself with the ailments that he had. And he questioned my intelligence every step of the way. And we got in front of the doctor and he had an attitude. He had a very angry outburst. And I looked at the doctor looked at me, and he goes, I'm trying to be kind to you. So here's what I'm going to do. I will send you to another doctor so that they can take a look at it. Sometimes it takes a second pair of eyes to be able to look at your documentation and assess you. And to me, that is the most compassionate thing that can ever happen, is for someone to say, I have come to the end of my own capabilities, and I'm sending you to someone, because the honest truth is sometimes another set of hands, eyes, and ears can find something that the other person missed. So to me, that's what compassion looks like. That's what it sounds like. And what it felt like with the energy in the room was where the patient got to take in a deep breath, even though he was still angry, got to take in a deep breath and said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that, And me knowing what anger is and where it comes from and how it's expressed in several different ways, that was the best outcome of compassion in that moment. So that's my example for you.
Wow, that is very good, because I think sometimes on the patient side of things, we get to where we feel sometimes they don't care because it's routine. And it's not that they don't care. I mean, we have to realize they see problem after problem after problem that they may or may not be able to fix. And we don't know what happened in the room just before us. I have to tell you that back some time ago, we had a situation with my father, and his doctor had a very rough patient right before us. And his nurse loves my daddy. And the way she shows compassion to my daddy is the way that my daddy needs it. My daddy loves attention in a certain way, and she gives it to him by joking around with him, making him feel special. It has nothing to do with really his health. It's all in the way that she makes him feel special. But she came into the room and she was like, I just want to warn you, if the doctor doesn't seem like himself, there was just a terrible situation that just happened, basically show grace, just show grace. And we could tell when he came in, he was not himself. But I was so glad that she just warned us so that we didn't think it was on us or whatever had happened. She didn't have to tell us anything other than he just had a bad moment, but so that we didn't feel we did something wrong, that his bad mood or his gesture or whatever. And so we then could have compassion for him as to what just happened. And, but it does go both ways.
Yes.
It
And you
goes both
just
ways.
described what it means to suffer with another person.
Yeah. Yeah. And, while my dad may not always get the answers he's looking for, he does enjoy going because the nurse always makes him feel special when he leaves. And that's her way of, I feel like, giving my dad the compassion that he's looking for. Because he doesn't get it everywhere. He doesn't get to go anywhere. So, he stays home 24/7 and behind four walls. So I love the way that you explain that. And it helps me, and hopefully it can help someone in the audience to understand what the true word of compassion is. I know people have the word compassion as a value for their entrepreneurship or as their business. And so when they use that word compassion, what does that word really truly mean for them? And I love the way that you explain that. So let's talk about the critical thinking process beyond the hospital itself. How has the critical thinking that's ingrained in you as a nurse transitioned into your everyday life and your coaching practice?
Yeah. Oof. So that's one of the first things we hear when we're in nursing school is we're going to teach you how to critically think. Our textbooks
Mm.
literally have things on the cover of it about critical thinking. And of course, we learn a lot. It's one of the hardest undergraduate degrees in the United States to get a bachelor's in nursing. And what that really means is that we get to learn the big, important things as well as the little ones, but the major things that we need to deal with. We learn just the very basics of our biology, all the way up to how medications interact with each other in the body and how it interacts with different parts of, all the organs. And so I remember when I was very lucky when I was in nursing school. I worked at St. Joseph's, which is now CHI St. Vincent in Hot Springs. Um, I worked there as a nurse, but I was a CNA there. I was a nurse's assistant. And because they knew I was in nursing school, there were some little things that I could do, which were within the scope of my nurse, being a CNA that I could do. And the nurses would also they'll watch me do things knowing that I was graduating nursing school in a few months and
Mm.
allowed me to have some sort of autonomy over little things like checking drain tubes and chest tubes and, gathering information for them and things like that. It was fun that they really trusted me to do that. So when I graduated nursing school and I went to work, it was fun because I think I'm one of the last set of nurses that wore white scrubs. I still had a nurse who had the little white hat on her head. She was our supervisor on the unit. And I remember swapping from my navy blue, which was for CNAs, to white scrubs, RN. It was
Mhm.
fun. The first week I went there, it was on the cardiac floor. And my preceptor, who also knew me because I worked with them during the day, she would just walk around with her coffee and go, if you need me, let me know. And I went, wait a minute, you're supposed to be showing me what to do. She goes, you're smart. I've seen you start IVs. I've seen you do blah, blah, blah. You're good. This particular patient doesn't have anything that you don't know about. And every time I'd go find her and she'd be just holding her little cup of coffee. And I appreciate her style because she knew who I was and she knew the way I learned was I had to do it. And then someone had to come behind me, make sure I got it right. And then the next time I started having patients, they brought me the complicated ones, the ones who were not just diabetic or just heart issues. There were diabetic heart issues and lung issues and all these other issues. That is where the critical thinking really jumped out for me. And it was being able to sit and just talk about someone and go, I can't give this medication now for these reasons. And she goes, okay, document that. And I'm going, oh yeah, I'm the nurse. I need to do this, and I'll go document why I didn't give it. And then when something improves, she goes, document that as well. And then I'd go document it. And at the end of the day, we went through all my notes, and, we were still handwriting notes. There's some new nurses now who don't know what a handwritten note is. So, yes, a lot of new nurses have come into like full on technology typing. I mean, we had handwritten notes, which we had to actually scan sometimes. And it was in those moments of just talking with my preceptor, and she goes, "You know what you just did today?" And I said, "What?" At the end of the day, I'm stressed. Did I hurt somebody? Did I document properly? I knew that I was doing great, but unless the person telling you, who's teaching you how to be a nurse, confirms this with you, you're just gauging. And she said, "What you did today with all your 4 patients, that was critical thinking." And I went, "Oh." And she goes, "That's what it looks like. It means you were able to think through the science and evaluate the patient and then determine if the treatment was right." She's also the same nurse. There were some doctors who would come. And I remember one time he came and he goes, "Who are you?" And I'm looking at everybody like they're talking to me. So I introduced myself. "Oh, I'm the new nurse." He goes, "There's a big giant L on your forehead." And I have a good sense of humor. So I was like, "Okay." And I started laughing. So the nurses then started laughing. And then he goes, I can't remember his name, but I know his face. And he introduced himself. And he goes, "Yeah, you did good yesterday." Then he told me, don't get used to me praising you type situation. So then once you figure out that they're doctors who upfront recognize that you're able to safely care for their patients using critical thinking, which is basically a problem solver, then everything just starts to make sense. Everything feels right. And it just breeds more learning and more compassion and more advocacy for people. Because then now you understand, if my patient looks like this, I need to tell the doctor that. That is what, as a new nurse, it's kind of hard to connect. We have all the information in our heads, but we don't have the know-how in our fingertips. I cannot remember the second part of this question. I love telling that story.
I love that story.
Yeah.
I love that story. It was, how has critical thinking ingrained in you as a nurse transitioned into your everyday life and coaching practice?
Yes. At the second part to this story is when I worked at a long-term acute care facility, and basically we got ICU patients. So most of my ICU type, they use that unit as an ICU from time to time. And you have all these IV lines going, all the beeping, all the screens, and then you have this person in front of you. And I remember once I got into the routine of people being on life support and all these things that I had to balance every day, so intricately done. And I got out one week and I went, "Oh my gosh, I am a nurse." Because before that, I used to, nurses tend to just put themselves down in a way where you go, "Okay, what do you do for a living?" You go, "Well, I'm just a nurse." No, that was the first time I said, "I am a nurse." Yes, I am a nurse. I can keep you alive. I know what to do. All these IV lines don't scare me. I know what to do. So the moment I came into that nursing, just like you and I, as women or as humans, we come into our own full self and our consciousness and awareness. There is also for every profession where you come into the full ownership of what it is that you do for a living. And that was that particular week, maybe 2014 or so, where I went, "I am a nurse. I'm a nurse. I am a nurse." So then fast forward, there was a rough patch there in 2016. Then I got a job with a case management company, and my confidence really, really took a plunge because that's when electronic applications came into play. I came from a generation where you just printed your resume and you went from place to place and you handed it to them. And if they wanted to interview on the spot, you were already dressed, well put together, and you did that. So coming from that, and I'm not that much older than some people, but it seems like a far, far away period, but it wasn't. And I kept saying, "But I'm a good nurse. Why is nobody hiring me?" And I learned a few things along the way about fear of missing out and how managers will have 13 resumes in front of them and have a hard time picking. I also learned that people will go and copy and paste like a job description and put in that's what they're picking. I'm like, that's why they're not choosing me, because I'm just stating the facts while they're playing the system.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time we hit 2020, the world had shut down and we were all at home. So guess what? There was this mass awakening. Everybody was starting to realize, wait a minute, we don't have to be living the way we were living.
Mm-hmm.
So 2021, January, first of all, I had been with my job at that time, I was in the community. And I found myself teaching people a lot about their health and how to speak with the doctors, how to present things to a doctor, basically teaching people how to describe their symptoms so that they don't get overlooked or underdiagnosed or overdiagnosed or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking, wait a minute. In the process of that, I was helping friends and family with weight loss and, mental clarity and all these good things. And I said, wait a minute, I could be doing something else.
Gives
not
me
just
chill
nursing.
bumps.
Right. And so 2021, January, we were stuck at home. It was snowing like crazy. We couldn't go anywhere. It was the apocalyptic snow. And I just remember being so restless in my spirit, in my soul. I was like, I need to be doing something else. I clicked on Health Coach Institute and I started coaching school. And the reason why I did that was because I already have the scientific background. I nerd out on medical information. Bring me a peer-reviewed document or any article medical. I'm all over it like white on rice. So I always tell people, if you want to enjoy your nursing career, be a nerd about it. Be a nerd about it. It makes everything more beautiful. So I said, that's good enough. And I have family and friends and coworkers who have benefited from my advice, from my education, or whatever the situation may be. Why don't I have the backing of a coach? So I did that. And I remember the first maybe 3 or 4 people I coached, that whole compassion, advocacy, and critical thinking just jumped out. And I'm sitting there thinking with this lady who wanted to lose 50 pounds, has never been less than 180 pounds in her entire life, except maybe when she was a kid. And I started to really critically think. I came up with a program just for her because I've helped people get off their blood pressure medicine. I've helped people get their blood sugars under control without even thinking that was the effect of my own coaching, right? And I sat there and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? If this was a patient in the hospital and they had so many IVs, and I considered the IVs as their blockages, the reasons why they cannot go through with this, because we had reached a plateau. And I started saying, this is one IV. This is the whole belief system. This is the reality. This is the fear. This is all those things. I'm like, how do I balance all those? How do I make all those levers, all those tubes flow in unison that is not overwhelming to this person's brain and to their heart and their soul, where they can receive this information and actually complete the 12 weeks with me. Mm-hmm. And I sat there and I broke through at least 2 more sessions after that plateau, where it became, okay, she's been big all her life. She wants to play softball for church, but she also cooks a lot in church. And we're in the South. And it's fried food and it's delicious. Oh my God, it's delicious. How do I get her to do veggies and add fruits? And she was diabetic and her blood pressure was up and all these other issues. I saw it in my mind's eye and I knew how everything was working together, but I needed her to trust her own self and believe that she could achieve that. The next week, she felt lighter. She had not necessarily lost weight, but she felt lighter. She got into a schedule with eating. And to me, that's where the critical thinking came in, because it was all the things about life as a whole that were stopping her, not necessarily her eating habits only, which had to change. Mm-hmm. So I do 12 sessions, and usually between the 5th and the 7th one, that's when everybody's starting to give excuses why it's not working or the plateau. I got her right to session number 8. And she called me and she said, I can't keep doing this.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what is it about this process that you can't do? She goes, I've adjusted my eating. I feel better. My skin feels better. I'm still taking my medicine and everything, but I just don't think it's in for me. And critical thinking also requires you to ask very important questions because the quality of your
Yes.
questions determines your life, right?
Yeah.
And I asked her, I said, are you afraid for the first time in your life to lose this weight? Are you afraid of losing your husband? Are you afraid of your church members who are generally overweight to see you as other, to see you as different? Are you afraid that you might become a happier person, a less sick person, which is not your norm? Are you afraid of that? She hesitated. I allowed her time to think through it. And she goes, yes.
Wow.
So I said, oh, okay. I understand that. I said, whenever you're ready, you know my number. You have my email. Call me. We will start over. And I will put other things in place for you so that when we get to that point where you're starting to feel better about yourself, I have other things for you to uphold you, other things to keep you moving in that direction. So critical thinking comes into play in every other part of my life. And I say this because I've been in rooms on an app called Clubhouse. I love that app for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard coaches talk, and I'm thinking my critical thinking skills have come into play way more than I ever thought I could, because I see all the levers, all the dimensions of life as things that need balance, that need adjusting as we go. That's where my critical thinking skills come in.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
You know, it hurts so much to know, because it's so true. It's so real that we do fear what other people think, what they're going to say about us losing weight, the things that are going to happen. That she was more afraid of those things than she was about feeling good about herself and looking great. You know, so many people want to lose weight because we're going on vacation and we want to look great in a
Right.
bathing suit. Heaven forbid, I'm not getting in another bathing suit. But we won't talk about that in this podcast. But so many people, that's what the reason why they lose the weight is they want to look good in the bathing suit. They want to look good in the cocktail dress. They want to look good in whatever it is. There's that goal. I mean, for me, mine was I wanted to look great on video. I wanted to be thinner on video. I could tell I was getting the double chin. My face was looking chubby. I could tell I didn't like the way I looked showing up on video. I was doing some stage events. I didn't like the way that I looked. I was very self-conscious about that. I wanted to lose the weight for many of those reasons. But it is true. We think about, okay, so what are people going to say when you start losing the weight? And man, you know, people, let's feel good. Let's feel confident. I feel so much better than I've felt in so long. And she, like she said, she was too. Her skin felt good. She felt good. But we have this FOMO. We have FOMO of missing out on something, or we have fear about other people rather than the confidence of the result that we're going to get. And like you say, the critical thinking process that you had to be there to coach her through the mindset that she needed to have, through the processes that you got her through. I hope the moral to the story is that she ended up getting to where she wanted to be. But let's talk about the journey of holistic nursing. You know, you talked about incorporating let me see if I can say this.
Biopsychosocial.
Yes, biopsychosocial aspects into healing. Yes. So can you explain what holistic nursing means to you and how we can practice that.
So the word holistic has been existing for eternity. And the origin of that word is also kind of Latin and Greek, which means as one. It's quite self-explanatory, holistic. And so I'm a Western trained nurse. However, I'm from Cameroon, West Africa, or Central Africa. I like to say West because when I say we're neighbors with Nigeria, everybody remembers that. But West Central Africa. I also grew up with a grandmother who made concoctions for us when we were sick. And so that whole homeopathic lifestyle and mindset has always been existing as well. And the holistic part comes in when I started doing long-term acute care, when I call myself the super nurse. I became a super nurse, and I started realizing, for example, as a nurse, you deal with a lot of dying people.
Yes.
And I started realizing there was one lady one time, this was one of the first times that I got to experience this. And in a different way, because I've also done long-term care in the nursing home. I've bathed dead people who have passed away. I've done all that. But while I was being a super nurse, this struck me really, really hard. I had a lady on life support. And so the doctors were like, her labs were, literally the machine was keeping her alive. And so we're sitting there looking at this lady. I've called the funeral home. I've called the family, let the religious person show up. And so I'm just carrying on with my day. And this woman was supposed to, wait for a family member. The family member came. She said, okay, it's time to pull her off the machine. Mm. And before that, there was one cousin who would show up and her heart rate will jump. Brain activity, so they'll call us from downstairs and go, what's going on with her? Her brain is going crazy. There's no order to the brain waves. It's just like, and so the sister that we were waiting for showed up and she said, yeah, they don't get along. But their mothers are so close, it's kind of hard to stay away from each other. That's why her heart rate will jump all the time, because that particular cousin will go, see, she's still alive. Look at her heart. It's right at 90 again, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at the heart rhythm going, this is not a normal heart rhythm. And you could not say anything to that lady. So when the sister finally arrived, her heart rate stabilized long enough to where she hugged her and said, it's okay, sissy. You've had a good life. All the family members came. We make them comfortable, explain what's going on and things like that. They come do their goodbye messages. And I was there. The doctor was there. We had the medication ready, pulled her off life support. We were literally waiting for like 20 minutes for her to pass. No, she didn't. She did not. It took her 48 hours to pass away. And within those 48 hours, her favorite nephew shows up. Mind you, her eyes are open and she cannot speak or anything, even though we took the tube out. Her brain activity is so scattered, but her heart's still beating.
She's
and
waiting.
You could tell whoever showed up in the room what effect they had on her. When her sister, the sister who took her off life support, was there, we did not give that lady 1 ounce of pain medication because she was already comfortable. She was in peace. Her favorite nephew shows up like hours later and he hugs her, cries, tells her he's going to miss her. It's okay to go. Mind you, I'm the nurse. Every nurse that has come through her were like, ma'am, your whole family has been here. Please, it's okay. It's okay to go. No, her nephew shows up, gives her a hug, holds her hand. This lady cracks a smile. And then 10 minutes later, she was gone. So that was my first, this is interesting. So I started paying attention to dynamics like that, who's in the room, what I'm doing, why they respond better to different doctors, nurses, or treatments. And I started with long-term care, it's easy with the elderly to ask them. I loved long-term care. I always ask them about their youth and this, that, and the other. And just because they're older, we naturally expect good stories. There were some really terrible people. But at the same time, you're like, it's still a human. They are now depending on me to care for them or the team to care for them. But then when I was a super nurse, everything made sense. Everything came into play where it was so much easier for me now to say, I don't want this person in this room, or here's how we're going to do something, right? Here's how we're going to do something. And then I transferred that to being in the community as a nurse. And I could tell when somebody's pain was not from the injury they received, it was because they were probably going through a divorce when they got injured. They were probably dealing with a troublesome child or some other medical issues. So then now you have to start thinking, was this person on pain medication before? Do they have a mental illness? What is going on in their lives that is still keeping them here when the doctor goes, but we've done everything? Why aren't you better? Why are you still complaining about pain? Why are you still complaining about A, B, C, D, whatever the situation may be? So it put me in a place where there was no other way for the last maybe 7 to 10 years. There was no other way that I could see my patients as just a body part. It was completely a holistic way of doing it. So by the time I started really coaching people, there was no other way to see a human, because we all have 8 dimensions, right? There's this 8 pillars of wellness or 8 dimensions of wellness. And while I coach people, I make sure to hit on all of those things, not necessarily go into depth with them, but to give people a tool to be able to say, oh, here are the scores, because it's online and everything. Here are the scores from what my life needs right now, what I need nourishing in my life. Is it my love life? Is it work? Is it financial things I need to pay attention to? Is it my own physical health or my mental health that I need to pay attention to? I allow people to have that so they can chart for themselves what they want. And if they bring it up, because I would usually ask, did you do the assignment? That's your to-do list. What do you feel needs nourishing in your life? And we talk about it a little bit, create a plan around that, including what they came to me for coaching for. And that way, it doesn't feel like I'm being separate from my physical self. I'm being separate from my job. It does not feel so disjointed, which a lot of the Western medicine tends to do, is to just focus on the body part of the problem and not see the person as a whole. So being able to be holistic gives me the opportunity to actually learn about myself and learn a lot from my clients as much as possible as my patients, to be able to understand that we are just not this one thing. We are not just our work. We are not just, I'm just a mom or I'm just a dad. We are all of those things combined. And if I can even touch on all those dimensions, even a little bit, there's a lot more clarity and more direction with the way people are handling themselves. Does that answer your question? I know that was a long roundabout way to do that. But.
Yes, I'm sitting here, just my mind is just going 100 miles an hour. It took me back to my grandma passing. I'll say I pictured her laying in her hospital bed at my aunt's home, because when we all told her that she could go home, it was just shortly after that she passed away. We were all there and told her that she could go, and she went. And as you're talking about all this, I did the human design scoring this morning.
Oh, yes. And I like human design scoring too. Yeah.
Oh, my word. I was reading that. I'm still not finished. So a friend of mine, a co-leader with me in Alignable, has been sharing the details with me about it. There's 4 of us that lead this group, and they've all taken it. I was the only one who had not, and they've all taken it years ago. And they've all been talking about it. And I've been like out in left field. And so I'm like, okay, guys, I've got to know what I am, so there's 1 protector and 2 generators. And so I'm like, what am I? And so one of them said, the one that gave it to or sent it to me, said, you're either a protector or you're a generator. And you might be a little bit of both. I'm not sure. So he sent it to me, and I was at my mom and dad's last night. I didn't have my time of birth with me, and my mom couldn't remember. And so I couldn't do it till I got back today. And so I did it this morning, and the lady who she created a chat GPT to go with that. And so I was running my results through chat GPT and asking all these questions and stuff. And I've just been mind blown at, you put your name and your date of birth in this thing, and it tells you all of this stuff about you. And it's so similar to the personality test, but so much more accurate than that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how does this thing know on your name, the place where you were born, and your date of birth, all of this stuff about you? And it's so dadgum accurate. It's freaky, scary, crazy.
Yeah.
But I'm like, Georgette, how? I mean, I have so many questions. I mean, so not that I have questions. I mean, I do have questions, but so much clarity.
Yes.
So much clarity at what I've done in my past, what I'm doing now. But again, I'm still like, how does it know? But I mean, it's just what it is. But, and just
we
like
can do another conversation about human design.
I know. It's just like what you're talking about right now. It just is so mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
It answers so many questions for me about when I do the reasons why I've made some decisions I've made and things that I do and so on and so forth. And so I don't want to get off on that because my audience will be going like, what the heck are y'all talking about?
Yeah.
But it's like, I want to incorporate that some way. I don't know. But anyway, that, like you say, that's for another conversation, but there's so much interesting stuff in that to what you're talking about. And so it interests me. It does interest me. And so let's transition now into entrepreneurship. But I do want to go back to one comment though.
Sure.
You talked about, early on, you talked about when the world shut down, because I want to talk about this for my audience's sake. You talked about, you were in nursing and the world shut down, and the realization that you had then about you have all of these skill sets. You were talking to these people, and the realization happened about these things and these conversations that you were having with people. And you realized, this is what I got out of it. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong. And if I'm wrong, it's okay. You can clarify it for me. What I got out of that is, because the world was shut down and you were on your own, you started realizing you were capable of more than what you were being given credit for in your corporate role. And we'll call nursing corporate.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you started gaining a confidence that you had all of this knowledge that wasn't being brought out or appreciated or recognized, and all of this because you were helping people. They were recognizing it, and you were going like, wow, I'm using my skill set on my own. I'm not having to rely upon my job to help people. And then you're like, I need to do something with this.
Yes.
Which is what I want my audience to get out of this, because I hear people who get terminated from their jobs, or they're laid off, or they're not happy, or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, you have such a skill set because you've gained all of this knowledge from what you've done that people are hungry for, so hungry for that knowledge. And if you just start talking to people about it, you're going to realize you do not need that corporate job
Oh, yeah.
behind you. It's not the corporate job that it makes you who you are. It's you that makes you who you are. And I have to tell you, I think I'm going to get a lot louder and a lot bolder because after reading that human design thing, I am like, OMG.
Yes.
That just patted me on the back for me to know that I know that I know that I know that I really am who I found out starting in April, because I kept saying in April, Tonya realized who she was in April, thanks to my coach. He helped me really identify. I was able to kind of ditch my banker label and realize who I was. And that really told me who I was, because all it knew was my name, my date of birth, and the place where I was born.
Yeah.
And it said, this is who you are. And I'm going, how did you know who I am?
Yeah.
Because I was created. And I knew when I was in high school, I wanted to do one of two things. And when I was in my corporate job, I got to do both. And I was mentored and trained and got the skill set just like you did. But it's not, that was your stepping stone to get to where you are today. It's who we are.
This story, where do I even begin? Okay. So
it's who we are.
Yeah.
That leads us into entrepreneurship, which is next. But go ahead and say what you want to say. I just want to encourage people today.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 2019, I was doing great at my job. And that's when I started getting the specific request. Can you please give this patient to Georgette? She can handle difficult people. Can you please give it to Georgette? She does psych really well. Can you give this to Georgette? Because she just knows how to get people to do stuff. And I was flattered. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm so awesome. They called me, singled me out to give me, so I'm enjoying this. 2020 comes and man, we were not going anywhere because I'm working in the community. I would meet my patients at doctor's offices, sometimes in the hospital, in different places. So we were not traveling as much to meet our patients. And I just doubled down on calling people for encouragement and be like, oh my gosh, the world shut down. And, I'm a nurse. And they'll be like, what do you think about this? And we'll have the conversations. And other people would just be, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. I don't even know if I have my job. And it was just encouragement. So then when I got done with coaching school in June of 2021, because everybody asked me, if you're already doing this, why do you need the coaching certificate? I said, I like to back things up because, it's just nice to back things up with like a piece of paper saying I've gone through a course, I've gone through a process.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, in 6 months, I am going to ditch my day job and I'm going to be the most awesome coach possible. And I'm like, okay, how do we do this? I'm on fire. I am doing all those, calls, talking to people and say, hey, I'm a coach. I can help you with this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. I'm excited. And I'm thinking, but some people just don't say yes to me. Why? I'm really, mind you, I still have a corporate job. I'm still working, and I created time to do the entrepreneurship things. In February of 2022, a friend of mine said, hey, let's go check this Clubhouse thing. I've heard good things. It came out during the pandemic, people were bored and lonely. It's an audio app. I get in there. The natural thing that happens, you stumble upon some audio rooms that are just not, don't do anything for your mental health or emotional, whatever. And then I stumbled on top of a string of rooms and people who I'm still in contact with outside of Clubhouse. And I went, I am nowhere near ready to ditch my corporate job to coach. I am not. Oh my gosh. I had talked to my friend and said, you know how to do websites. You're just going to do me a website. We're going to do this and that and blah, blah, and boom. Here we go. I'm going to be a coach. This is going to be great. What I learned was my whole personality and life got flipped upside down. That's when I learned about my own limiting beliefs when it concerns money. You cannot be an entrepreneur when you're not working on your money mindset. And I went, I am nowhere near ready to quit my day job. Like, whoa, I started working on that. And then I'm a single mom. I've been single for so many years. And I'm like, okay, that whole part of the, 8 dimensions of wellness is love. And I've been single now going on 7 years. So I was like, how is that going to work when I'm throwing myself all in one area? And I had to pay attention to that. Limiting beliefs about parents, limiting beliefs about who I am. Even though I'm very confident and I can be well spoken, I had so many limiting beliefs because then you go and you're talking to all these amazing coaches that you go check them out in real life. And these people are making money. They're speakers and all this awesome stuff. And you're going, who am I going to coach? Who am I really going to coach? And I started to feel really bad. I was like, oh, I am not quitting my day job anytime soon because I don't know who I'm going to be coaching. And I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is small. And this is not like the big state for coaching. We don't have the population enough to do this. But I just had all those limiting beliefs going through my head until one day I stumbled upon this lady and gentlemen. They were running a room. I think it was a whole bunch of moderators in there. And I sat down and I was just listening to them. Because when I go check their websites and things. And I'm like, if this is what they sound like as coaches, I don't want them. But then I figured they know how to make money. So I'm not here to learn how to be a coach. I want to know your process to make money, right? Then I said, okay, fine. Then my confidence kind of went back up and I said, okay, I'm working on my money mindset. I'm working on spiritual, emotional, mental growth, and all the good stuff while keeping up with the things that being a coach, and I was still coaching people, but instead of doing 12-week programs, depending on what they wanted, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 6 weeks and this, that, and the other. And when I after about 6 months, then referrals kind of slowed down and I started freaking out. And then I remembered there is just one me, Tonya. There's just one Tonya.
That's right.
You can tell me any day for the next 10 years how you do what you do. I will not be able to replicate it because the divine guidance that you have is not mine.
Right.
We might be saving ourselves and our lives and growing and saving the world one person at a time, but your divine assignment is different from mine.
Yeah.
The way the messages come is different from yours as well. The way we process information, our upbringing and the lives that we've lived, the hardships that we've gone through make us uniquely placed to be coaches because there is no other me. There isn't.
Yeah.
We can go to the same coaching school, but the way I coach there will be something that is so different that somebody's going to lead. So my confidence started building back up. And I learned my limiting belief was that I'm a good speaker because I did a lot of educational things, talks. I've traveled at least in the, surrounding states to do talks and things like that for different companies. And I said, oh, now I have to hone in on my speaking skills. Now I have to know how to tell my story. There was so much to learn. And I was like, I am not ready to ditch my corporate job until I align certain things. And that came out in the coaching that I've been doing on since then, where I am so much now aware of my own biases, not in the superficial way where we go, okay, maybe this person said something that made me feel some type of way. Now I am more open to receiving that and actually questioning myself, why do you have an issue with what they said or how they plan to do what they need to do, and have that conversation with my clients to be able to actually put them on the right path instead of doing the thing where the coaches that make a lot of money do, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that and blah, blah, blah. And then that's not who I am. That's not how I coach. So getting into entrepreneurship, it's like an unveiling of who you are. And what that requires is mental and emotional grit and understanding when you have messages coming from God to say, slow down, Tonya, slow down, Georgette. or pick it back up, or this is the right thing and the right, last year, like we talked about during the conference, my word was, or my phrase was, alignment is the assignment, because I realized that I was trying too hard to push through things I had no business pushing through because I didn't understand them. So the more I pray and position myself for alignment, the better things just show up, and I'm not expending as much energy. So if you're not ready to meet yourself, entrepreneurship is not for you.
Right.
There's so much more to learn. And I still have a day job because I'm a single mom, and I'm doing the background things right now to make sure that when the time comes, because I have to build the income. I did not realize I had to build the side income first before I quit my day job, because that excited me, would have been like, we're doing this. And then I would have been, crickets. But the day job allows me to have that steady stream of income. That way I can put the money into whatever I'm working. And then once the salary I get from coaching gets to living standards, then I will quit my day job. I will quit my day job. It's the most, if you don't have the right support as an entrepreneur, you are just going to burn out. You will burn out so quickly without the right support. That's why being in the Alignable program and the community is so helpful, because then I also feel like, oh yeah, this is another community of people who are moving their mission in life ahead, who are making those decisions and choosing themselves and putting themselves at the top of the priority list, which most people, most humans, especially women, are terrible at doing. So I liken it to relationships, and I understand relationships now much better, whether it's romantic or familiar relationships, that whatever it is that you're trying to change, you have to be ready to meet your own self. And if you cannot meet yourself, go find the tools to be able to meet yourself in those moments. So I can go into more detail, but
that is wonderful. That is great. And we're coming up on the hour. So I want to talk about, before we have to end the show, I want to talk about your book.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Coming Back to My Body. Yes. I want you to talk about what motivated you to write that book. Share a little bit about that in your journey of bringing it back to life.
So 2020 was the turning point. But prior to that, I had started changing some mindsets about things. And I started to feel some guilt and shame around trying or wanting to become someone else or do something else with my life. And then 2020 happened, and then the coaching thing happened. And then 2022, I felt really ill. I was so anemic. I was close to death. I didn't even know it. But I'm a long distance runner, and I kept active. So all I kept saying is, well, I just kept thinking, you're just fat, lose the weight. And then I lost the weight, and I went, well, I feel sicker. Like, what is this? It turns out I had a whole bunch of fibroids, uterine fibroids. So that also kind of drove me into a journey of going back into my homeopathic African roots, doing Chinese medicine, and marrying it with even Ayurvedic, which is Indian, and Western medicine. When I tell you I have a kitchen full of herbs and spices and teas, it is insane. I have oils. What didn't I do to heal myself, right? So I had surgery June of 2022. They took out the fibroids. And for the first time, I said, this is not going to slow me down. I don't want this to slow me down, because this process was so strange. I was by myself. My sisters are married and they live outside the country, and they couldn't come quick enough. And I went through this process alone, pretty much. And I was at home with my child the whole time. He refused to go to any of my friends who he has grown up with, and he spent nights and nights in their house. He wanted to stick by me. Wow. So during this whole healing process, there was another unveiling. There was some spiritual expansion. There was a lot of love that came from the people who could not physically be here with me all the time. And there was I really spent a lot of time on Clubhouse. Because I was alone, I just wanted to hear voices and see people. And my neighbors were awesome. The church ladies, I'm telling you, sometimes we don't know who cares about us until they care about us, right? Mm-hmm. So I was so overwhelmed by that. I learned boundaries in those years. I got angry at the food industry. I got angry at how water is sent to us into our taps. I was just mad at the whole world for all these little things I was discovering through Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, African herbalism, and Western medicine. And I was so angry with a lot of things. But by the time I came out of that experience, I ran my first half marathon in June. Not first marathon, half marathon after surgery in June of 2023. And I went, oh my gosh, in less than a year, I was half dead, had surgery, recovered, and I completed a half marathon. I was floored by that experience. I was floored by the ability of the body to bounce back and heal itself and do all these things. My understanding of minerals, all the things, even the medications that I've been taking forever, everything just became clearer. I had a deeper understanding of what holistic actually means. So one night I woke up in April. This is after this was not April. This was June. One night I woke up for about 4 hours. I was up from 2 to 6 and I just wrote everything out. My sister is the freelance editor. And I said, you've been asking me for a book for a while. Here you go. I know there are typos in there and everything. And so she read through it and she called me back within about 6 hours. And she goes, oh my God, it's a lot, but I can make it work. And she's my sister. So of course I could pout when she wanted to take something out or change something. You know, if I was paying her the bukus of money, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. But she says it's so much. She's like, you need another book after this, but let's try to sell this one first. And she goes, let's make it as a workbook in a way where you tell your story and then you give people the opportunity to write things down. And that format was really great because I touch on things like grief. I mentioned food. I mentioned exercise. I mentioned our spiritual health and everything. Those are areas in life where people don't have appropriate language for themselves.
Agreed.
It's all in their head, but there's no language for their own self to explain what they're feeling, what they're going through and everything. And the one way I found to be able to create my own language was to address these things and the communities I had created along the way and have these conversations with them and realize, oh my gosh, this is what this means. I'm not alone in this, but I know people who don't know how to explain what they're feeling. And so that's what this book is for. It's like an opening the door to give your own language to whatever it is that you're experiencing so you can actually explain to someone else and understand. Because language is not just to tell another person. It's also to speak to your own self in a way that is loving, that is kind, and that is understanding and compassionate. So that's really what the book does. And it's coming back to my body because the majority of us live in such dissociative states. We are functioning in systems that do not support our mind, body, and spirit alignment at all. We're functioning in systems that require our minds quite a bit or our bodies quite a bit. And our spiritual life is this far-fetched thing that we always assume does not blend in with the whole situation. Because my mission is to get people to have their own agency and that sovereignty to make decisions about themselves as accurately as possible without having to depend on anybody else's language but our own. So that's what the book is about, really.
So powerful. So powerful. Coming back to our body or my body, coming back to my body. Yes. Love that. And it's on Amazon, correct?
It's on Amazon. Just go over there. Coming back to my body. Georgette Nkwo, the author, and get your copy. It's $10.99. Yeah, $10.99 on Amazon.
Well, lastly, in closing, tell us about what your future goals and aspirations look like.
So right now I am part of a coaching community and it's called the Empowered Wellness Series. And we do talks twice a month. We pick a topic and talk about it. There are 4 of us so far who are the moderators of this. And we're growing that. We're up to 8 members now on LinkedIn. And so that's one thing that I'm working on. And this is just to create awareness and create a presence across all socials. But LinkedIn is such an awesome, rich place to be. And I'm starting there. The other thing that I'm doing is I just put up my website. It's called evolvefulness.com because that's the name of my coaching practice. And because I always see ourselves as constantly changing, we all have growth spurts. So coming into the fullness of each evolution is the reason why I created evolvefulness.com. So I've been blessed to be on podcasts in the past, and I'm here with you with Tonya. And there's another one coming up in April, and I'm talking to someone about one in March. And just kind of see if we can get the conversation going. It's pretty much exposure for me right now. Background work to make sure that once people start clicking on that website and scheduling time with me, they have something to go click back on LinkedIn, on Instagram, to be able to see that there is an actual real coach behind this, not some person who just decided one day that they're a great speaker and wanted to coach people. So that's what I'm working on, is creating that presence.
That is wonderful. Well, it has been such a great pleasure to have you here today talking to the audience. And for those of you that want to connect with her, we will definitely have her links in the show notes. She's also in the Influence and Growth Mastery community, so you can connect with her there. If you have not already joined it, please do so. Again, Influence and Growth Mastery was so good. So good conversation today. And I encourage you to leave your takeaways in the comments. She and I both will connect with you through the comments, answer any questions that you have, subscribe to the channel, and I will be back with you again next week. And until then, I hope your week is amazing. Goodbye, and see you again later. And Georgette, thank you so much again
My pleasure.
for being here.
My pleasure.
Yes. All right. Bye, everyone.